Thank you all for coming to the Guthrie Chamber Open Forum. We appreciate you being here. I love seeing a packed house. That's exciting. It's also exciting to me that these candidates have been coming regularly to our chamber events. That shows that our community counts, that our community votes, that we make a difference. So thank you all for coming. We really appreciate that. I wanted to thank Chris Evans of the Guthrie News page for moderating, also streaming live, and to Karen Ediger from the Guthrie News Leader for streaming live as well, and to, Aaron back in the back, who's doing us on Channel 20. So we are going to start tonight with Senate Seat 20. We're going to have our candidates up. Each has 2 minutes for an opening statement, 2 minutes per question. If you have a question you want to submit, there's cards over here. You can submit them as well. We have some that we were given online as well. Then they will have 2 minutes to do a closing statement. We have flipped a coin as to who will start first, and then we will move on to House District 31 after that. So let's get started. Come on up, guys. No, just right in the middle.
Okay. All right. Again, thank you all in the audience for being here this evening, and we'd like to introduce to you Aya Kelly and Chuck Hall. Thank you for both being here tonight. Both of you running for Senate District number 20, and we are 8 short days away from the primary Tuesday, so best of luck in your campaign. As Tracy mentioned, we flipped a coin. Aya won the coin toss, and we'll get the first one. And Aya, will you first please introduce yourself and what compelled you to seek office and your vision for the office?
So just my opening remarks?
Yes, please.
Okay. Hello there, I'm Aya Kelly. I'm running for State Senate for District 20. I did have my speech ready, but as I was reminiscing this evening, I got to, how many of you remember when Brahms used to be over on Division? Yeah, it seems like a million years ago, but I had one of my first jobs there when I was 16 years old in high school. I worked there 9 months and maybe made milkshakes and ice cream cones for some of you, and then I got my driver's license and got my car stuck for the first time in Mineral Wells Park, where my grandfather actually lived when he was superintendent of lakes and parks. My great-grandparents lived at 74 and 33 on a farm where my mother spent many happy days growing up. And then, you know, when I was a single mom, I remember standing in the grocery store here with my daughter. She's here tonight, and looking into her big brown eyes and saying, no, we can't buy fruit roll-ups today. I'm sorry. And then I got my education, and I got my first big job, and same grocery store, and I said, pick out whatever snacks you want for lunch. And when I was 25, I was diagnosed with crippling arthritis, and I needed medicine for that cost $3,600 a month. Couldn't afford that, so I lived 10 years in debilitating pain. And I used to walk the streets of my neighborhood right by Lake Guthrie with my daughter to try to maintain my mobility, and was able to get that medicine later and essentially got my life back. I helped my parents at God's Food Bank, where they worked for 14 years, and saw some of our seniors come in that couldn't afford food. They were buying medicine instead of food, and we packed backpacks for our children who otherwise wouldn't have food over the weekend when they weren't at school, and talked my husband into dressing up as Santa and handing out hats and gloves to the kids who were cold through the winter because they couldn't purchase such items. Now we live right by the Lazy E, and if you look on some of my paperwork, it says, of the people, by the people, and for the people. And I've been where some of you have been, and I think some of you have been where I've been, and while, yes, I want to fight for you, I want to walk shoulder to shoulder with you and fight the battles that you and our community face. I appreciate you being here tonight, and I look forward to serving our district.
Thank you, Aya. Chuck?
Yes, so good evening. Chris, Tracy, thank you so much for hosting this event and for the Guthrie Chamber of Commerce. I recognize that that this is an interview, and you need to understand that I don't think I've sat for an interview for over 30 years. So I am a little bit out of my element, but I'm more than willing and looking forward to addressing some of the issues that are in front of us this evening. The other night, I had the pleasure of being at a public forum in Perry, and somebody had the idea that maybe my mother would be a good one to introduce me, and so they prepared her some remarks real quick, and so she stood up to introduce me and began reading these remarks and became a little bit uncomfortable. And we all kind of felt for her a little bit. It didn't go as probably as smooth as she would have liked. And when it was over, towards the end, she really kind of got better. And I said, well, what did you do different? And she said, well, honey, I just kind of got away from what I had written down. I just kind of started speaking from the heart, and it kind of made me feel a little bit more comfortable. And so that's what I'm going to attempt to do today. I'm going to try to speak from the heart and let you know what I'm about. I'm a fourth generation Oklahoman. And I am a third-generation community banker. I've been serving as chairman and CEO for the Exchange Bank and Trust Company for a number of years. We have locations in Perry and Stillwater. I am the father of 3 beautiful daughters. I have my oldest daughter is a child advocate for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. I have my middle daughter who's with us this evening, Sydney. She is a junior at the University of Oklahoma, and she too is going into child advocacy. And then I have my youngest daughter, Riley, who's here this evening, who is going to hopefully go cheer for Oklahoma State University. She's a senior, will be a senior in high school, and we're awfully proud of her. I've been married for 24 years to my wife, Amy, who's with us this evening. She's the redhead in the group, wearing the Chuck Hall shirt. She is a public school teacher. She's taught in Tulsa Public Schools and Oklahoma City Public Schools, and now in Perry Public Schools. And so we're awfully proud of her. I've spent my whole professional career, not only in the banking business, but serving my community. I was blessed to spend some time serving as city treasurer for the city of Perry, as also as city councilman, and I served 2 terms as mayor of the city of Perry. So does that red light mean we're getting close?
It does.
Okay, so all right. So I've been serving my community for a long time, and I'm really looking forward to taking a step up and now serving my community and District 20, all the communities in the district at the state capitol. And thank you for having me this evening.
Thank you. And it will beep at you at 12 seconds, so then the beep kind of lets you know to wrap it up. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Chuck. You bet. All right. Our first question, our next one here is for Chuck first. We are all aware of the dire situation of the current state budget. Specifically, what revenue streams do you support for correcting the problems, and what is any specific programs would you cut?
Yeah, so we are aware, of the situation, and really what I hate is the fact that we've taken so long to really take the time to address, the education and teacher pay issues in the state of Oklahoma. Look, in my mind, I think what we need more than anything is we just need a plan. We don't have a plan in this state. We have not taken the time to bring educators and legislators and administration and whoever the next governor is going to be to sit down and really work out a plan for education. It's about creating a vision. We take a lot of time at the bank creating a strategic plan. And that strategic plan really makes us take a look at where we're at and where we want to be and how we get there. And so we spend a lot of time creating this document and working on a strategic plan. And I think that that's what we need, for education. Look, the funding is going to come from a whole lot of sources, but I don't think it needs to be new taxes. I think that we certainly need to take a look at these agencies. I think that there are efficiencies in operations that we can certainly find. We need to look for reforms where we can find them, and that's in all areas, including education. And I think that there are certain reforms that we can find and do a better job with. But we can certainly do it without putting more tax burden on our citizens. A diversified economy is what will help, more than anything. We are so reliant on oil for our future, in education. I just think that, and it comes with. Thank you for that. That's the one.
That gives you, 8 seconds.
seconds. Well, a diversified economy is really going to help us to be able to better. This buzzing is just driving me up the wall. I also want you to know that I think the state of Oklahoma is starting down the right steps. I think that they're starting to see that as we start to come into an economic expansion in our state, that we're going to have some excess that we need to point towards education and education funding. So I'm looking forward to being part of that plan. I'm experienced at it. We spend a lot of time in our strategic planning, our strategic offering. It becomes a working document for us, frankly. We look at it on a regular basis, and I think the state of Oklahoma should too. But the only way that we're going to be successful is to start bringing people together. We have got to bring those that are involved in education and in our legislature, along with our governor, and create a plan that's best for the state of Oklahoma and our teachers.
Thank you, Chuck. Aya.
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all aware of the dire situation of the current state budget. Specifically, what revenue streams do you support for correcting the problems, and any specific programs would you cut?
Okay, thank you. So yes, along with speaking about the budgets, being a single parent, we know that we create a budget and then we find the way to stay within that budget. And our leaders cannot expect us to do better than they do. Now, we look at the misappropriated funds, the mismanaged funds, and the misspent funds that are taking place at 23rd and Lincoln right now. And it is time to go in there and audit, figure out where those monies are going. And then if we want to find out how they're getting there, then we look at forensic audits. So the first thing is to find the monies that we already have that aren't being spent in the way that they were allocated for. And then this month, or last month, May 2018, if you look at the gross receipts that we got in, we are at a $1 billion, right at a $1 billion excess. We are in an economical upswing, and I really believe that everything we need to pay for in our budget right now is there. And as a future lawmaker, it will be our job to come through and find those funds, find the means, and never, never refer to raising taxes as a first solution. So we need to do that. And then as far as the education, we want to talk about funding that. I believe the funds have been there. And I believe with this $1 billion in excess that we have, over all the years that we have tracked those receipts, this is the most that we have ever had. You can find that on our state government website. You can find all of that information there. So I really believe that unifying, not fighting between Republicans and Democrats, Democrats and Democrats, Republicans and Republicans. Oklahomans have a common goal. All of us have a common goal. We come at it from different views and different perspectives because we're different people and we travel different paths. But I really believe that we can join hands and unify and do what it takes to get this state back to where it needs to be.
Thank you. Next question for Aya. In the same manner a business or of a family would have to do, is there any way that candidates could do a department by department and line by line current budget for the state?
That was a very interesting question. So just as each of us here tonight have to learn to budget and to spend our money wisely, we have hired those in office to do that with our money. And I really don't think that they have been completely well-versed in this area. Once again, as a single mom of 17 years and a business owner, and as a director who works for a nonprofit organization, it has been my job to create budgets and find the monies for the expenses that we had and to use that money responsibly. And I really believe with the technology that we have now right at our fingertips, that each citizen should be able to sit down at their computer and to pull up the budgets of each department. We should be able at any given moment to pull that up, to see where the money's going. And one of the questions that was in there was to ask specifically what could be eliminated, the expenditures that could be eliminated or reduced. We could see that right away, which ones could be eliminated, reduced, and see where those monies could be best used in the current budget shortfall. You know, this is what our state government requires of us, and I believe that all of our leaders should lead by that example.
Thank you. Chuck.
Sure, thank you. In my mind, and there's my mother. She just came. I can't believe it. Nice to see you. We were just talking about you. There she is. We needed to be talking about line item budgeting, really, and that's something in this state that we did for many, many years prior to the recession that came about. What happened back in the recession is that we just oil revenues began to crater. We were on the fringes of the greatest tax cuts that we've had, which were wonderful, but we didn't have the resources and the revenues coming in, and so they got away from line item budgeting. They went into panic mode up at the Capitol. What they ended up doing was just making the cuts in the agencies, and they left it up to the agencies to figure out how they were going to make ends meet. We need to get back to line item budgeting, and that's something that we can certainly do. We do that in our businesses today. Each and every one of you that have small businesses, we do it in the banking business. We sit down, every year, and we sit down and we do a line item budget. We do it department by department. We start with our management team. We go into middle management. We go down into our frontline staff, and we create a budget that is line itemed, so we know where the revenues are coming from. We know where the expenses are, and we hold our people accountable to it. It again is another document that you work on. I don't know how you can do it, without some sort of document that can track your success and failures. And so we absolutely need to get back to that. I think also another thing that would help is if we got back to assigning meaningful duties to the appropriation subcommittees. These appropriation subcommittees just kind of meet, and I think they just do it just to kind of say that they did. I think these subcommittees really need to be getting down deep into the weeds and talking to these agencies about where the real opportunities are for savings, for reforms in their area, and then we just simply need to hold them accountable to it.
All right. Thank you. All right, next question. We'll start with Chuck. Where do you stand on making Oklahoma agriculture better, since agriculture is one of the major revenue generators for our state as well as employees? What will you do to back it and strengthen it?
Sure. Well, of course, as a community banker and somebody that spent, years, helping the family farmer, what we need to do is we just need to get government out of their way. That's just simply what needs to happen. We need to protect property rights, of the farmer. We have commodity prices that just fluctuate like crazy, in Oklahoma, and it makes it difficult, for the Oklahoma farmer to do, what they need to do. So, in my opinion, the best thing that we can do is just get government out of their way, and allow them to be the stewards of the land that they always have been. I want to make sure that that we don't cut any benefits that are effective to the Oklahoma farmer. Oklahoma farmers don't have retirement funds. What they have is what they build and what they grow, on their farms. They've invested, and sometimes generationally, in the family farm. And when it's time for them to move into some sort of health care need that they may have, or retire, or to turn that over to the next generation, we just need to be there for them and make sure that that their quality of life is upheld. I don't know how we could be the Oklahomans that we are today without the fundamental understanding and belief that we and greatness that we get from the Oklahoma farmer. They provide for us. They put food on our table. They make us meaningful in the world economies, and I think we should do everything we can to support them.
Thank you. Aya.
Yes. One of my first approaches to make all of our businesses successful is to keep taxes lower here in our state. There are companies in New York that are looking for places to go with lower taxes, just like some of our businesses used to go to New York. And so the fact that Oklahoma taxes and business taxes remain lower is something that we really need to fight for. Another thing is that we need to reduce regulations, and we are slowly working at that. But I have a neighbor right near me. As I mentioned, I live right by the Lazy E, and he raises goats. And we visited extensively with him in his home, and he is not allowed to do the things that he needs to do on his little goat farm, and has to take these goats to another place or hire someone to come get these goats and take them to another place to maintain his farm because of the regulations. And so I feel that reducing the regulations, giving our farmers, our own farmers, our people, the incentives that they need to be successful in our state. I have asked several different people to serve on my advisory committee while I'm in my campaign and then on into office, and one of them is a person who is in agriculture in Kingfisher, and he was talking to me about these same things, that the fuel prices for the farmers and different things like that, that we need to keep the rates lower for them. We need to think about them. We need to always consider them when we are making laws and voting laws down at 23rd and Lincoln. And another thing that we need to do is remember educating. So many things that our children aren't learning these days in school, and one of the things that we need to always keep are the assets of our state, and one of those is farming and agriculture, that they are learning the tools, having the tools and learning the trade to be successful here in our state, also in farming and agriculture.
All right, thank you. Kind of move over to education now. We got a lot of questions on that that was brought in, as well as some questions up here. But first off, tell us about your own personal experience with public education. Aya first.
Okay, so my own experience with education is that I was born and raised in Okinawa, Japan. My parents were missionaries, and I had an option to attend private schooling or to go to Japanese school. And so my parents sent me to the private school so that I could learn English. When we came back to the States, I had been in accelerated Christian education, so they continued me in the same curriculum that I had been studying in all along. So once I graduated from high school, I received scholarships to attend the University of Central Oklahoma, which is a form of our public education, and I obtained 2 degrees there, and also put my daughter through University of Central Oklahoma. She's now at OCU Law. I taught at a school on Hefner that is for children with learning disabilities. I taught there for a year. I've taught here at 2 of our private schools, and I've taught at Langston University for 11 years. Did you want just public education experience, and that's all?
That's whatever you like to do, yes.
Okay.
Yes. It was so, in addition to public education, there was another question. You said that you've taught K through 12. Where did you teach these grades, and what did you teach and how long?
I taught for a year at Trinity School on Hefner. I taught music, and this, again, was a school for disabled children. I taught at Edmond Christian Academy in order to help to pay tuition, and I also taught at Grace Covenant Academy here in Guthrie. I taught all different subjects. I taught English, I taught Japanese as a second language, I taught music, I taught voice, theater. I also taught piano. I had my own private studio, which is outside of the public school sector. I also taught in the after-school program at St. Mary's in Edmond, and I think that's the answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. And Chuck, I'll rephrase the original question. Tell us about your own personal experience with public education.
Sure. Well, let's see what I've taught. I've taught girls golf at Perry Public School, and I did not have the success that Guthrie's golf team had winning the state championship. So that's my experience with teaching in public schools, but we have great experience with public schools in Perry. My entire my father and grandfather were all public school educated, along with my mother. I was publicly school educated. My girls were all public school educated, and my wife teaches in public schools. You know, we are just such a fan of public schools. As I look around and drive the district, and I look at Cleveland, and I look at Pawnee and Morrison and Hennessy and Crescent and Guthrie and all the communities in between. These schools are the lifeblood lifeblood of every community. Without them, they just wouldn't have much. And so I'm a big fan of public education. I think that we need to do everything that we can to make it better. What we need to do in the state of Oklahoma is we need to spend less and we need to invest more. An investment in public education is the way that we can create and have more prosperity in the state, more job opportunities. I don't have to worry about my girls looking for work someplace else. They're going to be properly educated in the state. They're going to be prepared for some form of continuing education, and I'll support whether it be college or career tech or whatever there is, but I just want them to be educated to the best of their ability. The greatest percentage of our kids in the state of Oklahoma are publicly educated, and it's a constitutional mandate that we have to provide education for them, and I want to do it at the best way possible.
All right, thank you. We set that question up to set up the next question.
Sure you did.
And we will go with Chuck first on this one. How would you handle the current teacher pay crisis? Was the teacher walkout a success? And please share your thoughts on the group Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite, who argue against the bill that would increase teachers' salary by an average of $6,100 with the tax increase that was passed earlier this year.
Yeah, so we'll start with the last first. I mean, look, I took a real look at the Taxpayers Unite, and I tell you what, I mean, they're rooted in some really good Republican principles. I like a lot of their program and a lot of what they're doing. But I think this question is probably really related to where are you on the potential repeal of this, and I don't mind telling folks, when the legislature was debating this and talking about it, there was a whole lot of different plans that were proposed. We had the Taxpayers Unite, we had the Step Up Oklahoma. There was a lot of discussions that were going on about how to fund education, in this state. Again, I go back to, I just hate the fact that we waited so long to take a look at this. Education and education funding has been a real issue in this state for a long period of time. And so it came down to, we had to take action. I wasn't in the room. I wasn't part of the discussions, but I'm not in favor of the repeal. I think that we need to be looking forward rather than behind us. It's nice to see that we've kind of brought the teacher pay up to some sort of pleasant average, but we can't stop there. What really needs to happen is we have to fund these classrooms better. We have to do a better job of funding these classrooms, and we have to prioritize our expenses. I just feel like that it's time to move forward. We don't need to fall back again. We need to create a funding source that doesn't raise taxes in this state and provides these kids with the quality education that they need and deserve in the state of Oklahoma.
Good timing.
Button.
That's good timing.
Wow, I'm starting to get a feel for this. I'm in a rhythm. I'm feeling it.
Thank you, Chuck. Aya.
Yes, when I first announced my campaign was when the just about right when the teacher walkout happened and OTU actually came to light, Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite. And I actually went down to the Capitol that day and spoke with many of the lawmakers and asked them questions. I listened to the press conference and I talked to the different people who were presenting in order to make an educated decision. Now, as a teacher, it is imperative that we provide not only a free education, but that we provide a good education. And so when we look at this, we can't just look at funding, we have to look at giving a quality education to all of our students. Not chosen ones, not chosen areas, but all of our students. And so I have been approached with that petition 4 times now, and it has been my choice not to sign that because the decisions that the lawmakers have made behind us is now what we look forward to and find out how to fund this. Now, the funding that was provided with the tax raise only provides that funding for 12 months. Now, the first thing I will do is I will read a document before I sign it. And so when you are looking at this kind of a crisis, it's not something that you approach with a 12-month answer. I am a constitutionalist. The Constitution demands free education, and I will support that with all of my might. So then we talked to OTU, constitutionalists. I think I answered all of that. The walkout was actually caused because the legislature didn't listen. And sometimes extreme solutions take extreme measures. I think we've got the people to talking. I think we're going to in a good place. I think we have the funds to pay for what we need to, and as lawmakers, that's going to be our job.
Thank you. And that kind of leads into our next question. We'll let Aya go first on this one. What is your plan to find funding to allocate public education, including per pupil funding and teacher salaries? What specific revenue streams or changes would you promote or support if elected?
Well, I really believe that the funding is already there. I would like to be a part of getting a handle on the misappropriated funds that we already talked about, the misspent monies, the monies that are going to places where they are not allocated. I am trying to join a group of people who last year were ordered to pay $10 million back to the lottery fund that they spent in places that they shouldn't have. This should not be happening. And so that's one of the first places we've got to find the money that's missing. I already mentioned the gross tax receipts that are showing an excess of $1 billion. I really don't think that we need to go find the funds. I think the funds are already there. And as a teacher and as a lifelong advocate of excellent education, I will always support not only the funding for education, but I will work hard to ensure that each student is provided the best opportunity for a great education.
Thank you. Chuck?
Well, we just simply can't get lulled into a false sense of security. We're all Oklahomans. Many of us have been here our entire lives. We've seen the ups and downs of the economy. We've seen what oil and gas does. Sometimes we're living great, and sometimes we're living large, and sometimes we're living low. I started my banking career right around the time of the Pink Square Bank failure. That was back when everybody was thinking that the oil and the money is going to keep coming, and it's never going to go away. Well, we're actually coming into a pretty good period, she's exactly right. I mean, I've talked with the state treasurer and got the numbers. We're talking numbers to the tune of $1 billion that are greater than the revenues that we had from even a year ago. I don't want to see us get lulled into a false sense of security. It's going to be easy for new incoming legislators to say, you know what, we talked about needing to fix all these problems on the campaign trail, and now we got all this money, we're flush with it, and we don't need to address it right now. Bankers have something that's called a loan loss reserve. And what we do with that loan loss reserve is we prepare for the downtimes. We prepare for the period when the loans might not be paying. And so we create this reserve so it's there to protect the bank and to protect the stockholders in the down times. Well, when do you think that we add the most to the loan loss reserve? We do it in the good times. When the bank is doing as well as it possibly can, that's when we create and build up the loan loss reserve to prepare for the bad times in the good times. I think the state of Oklahoma with the Revenue Stabilization Fund has really done a good thing. And if you don't know what that's about, that's where it's brand new this year and it hasn't been funded yet, but it will be. When oil prices are up and there's excess money, then it goes into the Revenue Stabilization Fund for when the down times come. It's the loan loss reserve for the state of Oklahoma. That will help us to fund public education.
All right, thank you. Next question, one more on education. We'll begin with Chuck here. What is your stance on school vouchers and charter schools?
Well, I think that parents should have a choice, and I'm glad that they do. I think every parent should take a look at the very quality education opportunities for their kids and make a decision that best fits them. But I got to tell you, and as I said from the outset, I'm in favor and a fan of choice. I just want you to choose the school. I want you to choose the school around the corner. That's what I want. I want you to choose the local school. I want it to be funded to the extent that we are proud of it. The reason that I think that we're looking at all these other options without a constitutional mandate, meaning that the public education is that a lot of parents are just not liking the product that's being produced. And I think that what happens is that we need to get serious about funding public education. We need to get serious about about funding these teachers so that they're not out looking for other jobs and other opportunities and looking for teaching opportunities, in other states. I can't imagine going 10 years, 15 years, 20 years in the banking business and not looking at cost of living increases or pay raises for my people. What I would do is I would lose them. They would go someplace else. I've invested so much time and so much effort in training them, and the fact that I wouldn't stay competitive, in the market just doesn't make sense to me. We need to be competitive. We need to fund the classroom, and we need to make public education the choice of the many and not just the few.
Thank you. Aya?
If we would do what we needed to do with public schools, we wouldn't need any other kinds of schools. Our schools need the funding that they deserve. Those are our gems. Those students sitting behind those desks are our future. What we put into them is what we're going to get out of them. I am a constitutionalist and I support parental rights. There is no one who knows the learning style of their child more than the parent does. And so while I think that our public schools need to be funded and they need to be in tip-top shape, I still have to support the rights of parents to educate their children in the way that they see fit. Personally, I don't support vouchers, since that was part of your question. I think there would be some other ways to approach that, but there's multiple reasons why I don't think that vouchers are the right way to go. So once again, I go back to our constitutional requirement of funding our schools, of paying our teachers, of giving students the education that they need to graduate from high school and to score high on those tests so that they can get scholarships, so they can go to college, so they can go to VOTEC, so they can learn a skill, so they can become valuable citizens, and we keep them right here in the state of Oklahoma as our businesses and commerce continue to grow and even our rural areas become more successful.
Thank you. Next question will be, and we'll start with Aya. On June 26, voters will vote on State Question 788, better known as medical marijuana. Many believe this measure will pass and will help adults and children with their medical needs. But others believe the ballot measure is not only for medical marijuana, but recreational marijuana. What is your position on this important matter?
As far as 788 goes, I've read it, and honestly, I feel that it is a bill for recreational marijuana. I have visited with an attorney who represents 788. I have visited with several lawmakers, including our own police chief. I've even visited a grow farm in Michigan and talked to friends in Colorado, Oregon, and in Michigan about what their state is going through these growing pains. Now, I do believe that there is medicinal help in marijuana for those who need it. It helps with PTSD. It helps with cancer. It helps with the kind of pain that I endure sometimes on a daily basis. But I believe that if we want a medicinal marijuana bill, that this bill is going to have to be rewritten in order to put in specific illnesses, specific dosages. They need to be prescribed by medical doctors. Where we stand now, a veterinarian can prescribe marijuana for you and for me. A 14-year-old does not have to answer to a law enforcement agent on whether they have it or how much they have. Our law enforcement would have to be completely revamped. Our drug dogs that are at about $8,000 a piece will be completely useless. Our officers can't ask people if they have drugs, and if they do have marijuana, do they have the right weight? Do they have the right amount? Or are we gonna stand there and weigh? The police officers that I visited with are very concerned about this bill. So I think that we need to specify between recreational and medicinal and make sure that we're looking at the right kind of bill here. Also, employers, they won't be allowed to drug test. There's a lot of issues with this. So if we're talking about a medicinal marijuana bill, I feel that 788 is not the bill for us.
Thank you.
Thank
Chuck.
you.
Well, we ought to have applause all over the room. I think I have been in a couple different forums, and we completely agree on this issue. I can tell you that I absolutely believe that there is great value and I believe what I read in pure medical marijuana. I think a lot of lives can be affected for the better. I think there's a lot of Oklahomans that can experience a better quality quality of life as a result of it. And I would like to see it happen. Honestly, I really do. But I think it needs I think it needs to have some better protections. This is a question that's written pretty broad. There are a couple of issues that I think about as an employer, particularly in the banking business. The way this question is written, while they're not allowed, while users or those that are held in a medical license are obviously not allowed to use the product during business hours, they can use it before business hours. They can use it during their lunch break, and then you can use it immediately after business hours. And so I just got this vision. I just had this vision of some of my tellers, who were issued a medical marijuana license, that are going to medicate before they come to work, and the next thing you know, when they think they're passing out $5 bills, they're passing out $100 bills, and it concerns me that there's no protections for that. We have drug testing policies, with our organization, but the simple fact is that with the medical license, we won't be allowed to use them. The only way that we'll be able to handle those situations of that potential abuse is to show a history of that employee's failure to be able to complete or do their job functionally. And so imagine the $100 bills that could be passed out in the form of $5 bills over me trying to do the legal side of it and keep it and interview them over 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So I have concerns from that area.
Thank you.
You bet.
We'll begin with Chuck on this one. What does criminal justice reform mean to you? We've been hearing a lot about gun control. It's one of the many terms that gets thrown out as propaganda, but nobody talks about what it really means to them subjectively as an elected official. What does criminal justice reform look for you under your watch?
Well, criminal justice reform, is important. I mean, we have reform needs all over the state of, the state of Oklahoma. I mean, we have budget issues, we have education issues, health, we have social services issues, public safety, transportation. But criminal justice reform is an important issue that needs to be addressed. I mean, the fact that you can turn on late night television and hear people making jokes about Oklahoma being the #1 in incarceration is just really, for those of us that that have been our whole lives in Oklahoma, it's hurtful. It's sad. We need to change that. We need to see criminal justice reform. We do talk a lot about guns and gun issue. Look, I'm a big advocate in the Second Amendment. My belief is I would think that at some point we're going to get some questions related to that, but I'll just jump right to it. I mean, I'm a supporter of the Second Amendment. I do believe that we have the right to bear arms. And I support it wholeheartedly, 100%. My family are hunters and fishermen, and I've taken the concealed license exam. I've gone through the rigors of that, and I have a license to carry. But back on the question, we need the reforms. I think that we need to take a look at mental health. I think that there are rehabilitation options out there that can reduce the number of incarcerations and the people that were incarcerated. And I think at the end of the day, it's going to save us dollars that we can reappropriate and put in a place that are more effective, for the state of Oklahoma, particularly education.
Thank you. Aya.
Yes. So our prisons are overcrowded. We have one of the highest incarceration rates, not only in our country, but in the world. And it has been said that third grade reading skills are in direct relation to how many prisons that we need to build. So once again, referring to education, there's so much that happens even in our elementary years that we need to be teaching our children. Mental health, we have lost some of our funding for some of our core services, and this is one area. I was visiting with someone out at Job Corps, and they said that we have not had a counselor there for several years. Of all the places that we would need to have a counselor, that Job Corps is without a counselor right now. So you can see that we have lost our funding for some of our very most core services. This was also involved in our education funding. It was all a big package deal. But we do have to provide for rehabilitation from addictions and paths to recovery, roads to clearing records for nonviolent offenses so that we can keep our citizens working and responsible. I have a cousin here that went through ARC, the Salvation Army program. He's back there. 5 years in October, recovered from meth and alcohol abuse. He's bought his first house. He paid for his first car. He's had a job for over 3 years that he's never missed a day. And that's because he was provided these services that have now kept him out of prison and jail, where he had been since the age of 19 until 41. So you can see that it is in direct relation to provide these rehabilitation. We need to take some of the monies that we're using to talk about building new prisons and building onto prisons and making prisons better. Prison and jail doesn't need to be a nice place to be. We need to look at rehabilitation, mental health help and issues, and funding those core services.
Thank you. Next question. I don't think we'll need the full 2 minutes from both of you on this one because I think we all know the answer, but it's on the question form, so I'm going to ask it. Where do you stand on the Second Amendment? Will you defend it? And have you ever fired a firearm? And when was the last time you fired a gun?
Oh, ask me. Ask me.
We'll let Aya go first.
Those were a lot of questions there. I am a constitutionalist. I am a Second Amendment advocate. It is our inalienable right to protect us from tyrants. I'm glad you can protect your property and yourself and you can hunt, but it was given to us to protect us from tyrants, and I will fight for the rights of our Second Amendment. Now, the last time I fired a gun, if you are on my Senate Facebook page, which is Kelly for Senate, you will see the last time I fired a gun because I put a video on there and you can see for yourself if I'm good at it.
Thank you. Chuck.
Well, I've already answered it. I've already answered that. I'm absolutely a supporter of Second Amendments. My family and I spend a lot of quality time on a family farm, hunting. We take hunting trips together. My youngest daughter and I just got back, from a trip not too long ago in Montana on a successful hunting trip there, and made memories together. So if the question is, when's the last time I fired a gun? 2 weeks ago. Yeah. We are learned users of our weapons. We're studied. I have taken each one of my daughters, and by the way, my oldest daughter had just showed up tonight too. All three of them have their own guns. We've been out on the farm. We practice safety. We have a lot of experience using them, and we use them functionally, and we are safe when we do it. So it's something that we do together as a family that we totally enjoy, and we spend a lot of time doing it together.
All right, thank you. And we have some questions from our audience. We're not going to be able to get to all of them tonight because we don't want to keep our candidates here all night long. But the first one, what is the most expensive contract you have ever negotiated, and what was it for? And I believe that's Chuck's first.
Well, I have experience in several different areas related to contracts and what we've negotiated. I can tell you that I have a hot one going right now. We're building our second location second bank location in Stillwater, Oklahoma. That's a multi-million-dollar facility that we let bids on, and we're working with a construction management group. So, I negotiated the contract with the construction management group for the purchase of the property, for the build out of the facility. And so I spent a lot of time, in real estate acquisition and contract work there. I've also spent a lot of time with the Oklahoma Municipal Power Authority. I'm on their board of directors currently. This is a group that provides retail power to municipalities across the state of Oklahoma that own their own municipal electric system. Several communities in our district, our Senate District 20, are members of the OMPA, and I've helped to negotiate with contracts related to purchase power agreements for our municipalities within the 42 member cities that the Oklahoma Municipal Power Authority has. So I've spent a lot of time in negotiating contracts and agreements, multi-million-dollar agreements, all the way down to the smallest. When I think about the smallest ones, that's quite simply the loans that we make in our own office. Those are contracts, people, and we hope that we've reached an understanding with the borrower and the lender together that they'll do what they say they're going to do. So all the way from the smallest agreements to the largest agreements, I've been a part of it.
Thank you. Aya.
Yes, as I was considering this question, I was reminded of the biblical story of the widow's mite. And I think sometimes a transaction and the size of it is in reference to what's going on behind that transaction. So once again, as a single mom, creating my own budget and finding where to spend things, and sometimes it was what bill to pay and what bill not to pay, then I had that responsibility. But most recently, probably about 6 years ago, I was one of the main people who wrote the transaction for a $6 million sale of Muskegon River Youth Home in Michigan. This was a sale that took probably a year to a year and a half, and there were several attorneys involved. And although I majored in music, my passion is also in linguistics. And so I really enjoyed working on this document, but I would say that the $6 million sale of Muskegon River Youth Home was probably the largest transaction I've worked with, or it is the largest transaction.
Thank you. Next question, we'll begin with Aya. Before starting this campaign, what nonprofits did you volunteer for and what did you do?
Well, throughout high school, I volunteered for different charity events at, actually it was in college. I volunteered for several charity events that went on there, but with my parents being involved with Red Cross for several years, they had many fundraising events that were in conjunction with United Way. And I often helped with their fundraising events. I performed the music for those, and generally whatever my mom and dad asked me to do is what I did. And then my mom volunteered at God's Food Bank before she became the operations manager. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of you donated canned goods that I helped unload from pickups and sort and place into bags to feed thousands of people each and every week. So I was deeply involved with God's Food Bank, and also I helped with all of their fundraising events. As a musician, that's just what happens. Also, I had a friend here in Guthrie who for many years stood down at Walmart and asked many of you for hats and gloves for our children who didn't have those during the cold season. She was a dear friend of mine, and she passed away several years ago, and I took that over for her. And I collect hats and gloves in the winter for our children who need them. And George, my husband, dresses up as Santa, and I dress up as Mrs. Santa, and we give those hats and gloves out to the children of our community. And those are just a few of the things that I've been involved in.
Thank you. Chuck.
Yeah, well, as a community banker in any small town, and you can think of your bankers all over, including here in Guthrie, you're going to find bankers involved in the community. You really don't have a choice. You're kind of expected to do so. I've been involved, in our community in nonprofit volunteering for some of the greatest organizations that we have around. Main Street is something that really comes to mind. The Chamber of Commerce, a wonderful organization. The fact that these groups are really working for business development, they're working for downtown revitalization. We've been very active, in that over the years. I was 10 years chairman of the Perry Memorial Hospital Trust Authority. We spent a lot of time working on ways to provide, reasonable health care, for our citizens. Probably the biggest nonprofit that I ever worked for was the City of Perry, which is, and it really, there were times that it truly felt like a volunteer position. You get, you have a lot of responsibility and a lot of duty, and the good ones, really don't spend a whole lot of time taking the credit. They're just out there doing the job that they need to do to make their community better. And so, community service. Being involved in the community is something that I've spent numerous hours doing. I think of our Relay for Life team, our organization there that raising money for cancer research. We have just spent an enormous amount of time volunteering, putting that effort together, to raise money to help others. So that's something that I've done my entire life and plan to continue to, regardless of the outcome of this election. We have to want to give back. That's what makes Oklahoma who we are.
Thank you. Next question, we'll start with Chuck. What pledges and or petitions have you signed?
Can I make a quick quick answer to it?
Sure.
I've signed no petitions. I've signed no pledges. I haven't signed any pledges or petitions. Mom's in the room.
Thank you. Aya.
Yes, the pledge that I have signed is the pledge that is with Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite, and it aligns parallel to the Republican platform: low taxation, criminal justice reform, and the likes.
Thank you. Next question for Aya. How have you funded your campaign? Who else has put money toward getting you in office?
Well, let's see. We started out with putting our own money into our campaign fund, and then I could not begin to name all of the names of friends and family who have generously donated to us. OakPac has donated $2,000 to my account, and I understand that Oklahoma Federation for Children has donated 2 mailers. That's it.
Thank you. Chuck.
Well, you start out by putting your own money in it. I mean, if you can't invest in yourself, you can't ask these people to invest in you. That's for sure. We then circled around to friends and family, and I was blessed with having a lot of support in that area. We've held several meet and greets, around the district to meet the people and to get our message out. And we've got a lot of real individual supporters as a result of it. I have been endorsed and received some money from the state chamber. I've also related, I'm sure, to your agriculture question. The Oklahoma Farm Bureau Association has endorsed my candidacy. I was not aware until I jumped on Facebook and saw the IE, or the dark money, the independent expenditure, and I think you were talking about that yourself, related to some expenditure that somebody is making on my behalf that I know nothing about. And in fact, I don't like those things. The fact that, and really what this comes from, in case you weren't able to read or understand where these independent expenditures come from, this came from a Supreme Court ruling where corporations, said that they have the right to the freedom of speech. And the Supreme Court ruled that they do, and so these corporations can decide if they want to do some sort of independent expenditure, to spend some money either to hurt a candidate's campaign or to help a candidate's campaign. I have no collusion with them. I have nothing going. I have no contact with them. I don't know who it is. None of that money ever made my campaign account. I've never seen any of it. I don't know what product they're going to put out. I don't know if it's for me. I don't know if it's against me. But I do know that they're required under this ruling to at least put my name to it. But I have no tie or understanding of who did that or anything, as it's supposed to be. Those are both federal laws and state laws. I can't know anything about it, and I don't know anything about it.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our Q&A portion of this, and we're going to end the night here with your final thoughts here for your campaign as voters go to the polls next Tuesday, 8 days from here. And we'll begin with Chuck.
Yeah, sure. Well, absolutely. And Mom, you weren't here when we were talking about this at the beginning, and the conversation you and I had about how much easier it is for you to have talks like this when you speak from the heart. And so, I've learned from my mother my entire life, and I continue to learn from my mother, even as recently as last Thursday. We started this by me saying that this is a job interview. I recognize that. I know that the people of Guthrie that are here tonight, the people that are watching on Facebook, and those that are watching on your public information network are trying to decide, about this guy. And I understand it probably better than most. I can remember, when Perry has never had a state senator other than the first one was Henry S. Johnston, who was the first president pro tem of the Oklahoma State Senate, and he was senator from Perry in 1907 when Oklahoma became a state. And so we haven't had one since. So I can only imagine what you're feeling right now, because we feel this whenever we get a new elected official that we haven't really fully got acquainted with. And it really becomes incumbent on that candidate, to be somebody that's going to be in the public eye, that's going to project themselves and truly, have that we're going to represent your interests, that we're going to listen to you, that we're going to be in the area, that we're going to be in the district and in the community. I can remember when our last two senators, were elected, thinking, doggone it, I mean, we don't have somebody from here locally. In this last case, we had somebody, from the Guthrie area. Well, let me tell you, if they are a true public servant, if they're there for the right reasons, they're going to spend time, in the district. They're going to understand the people, understand the needs, and they're going to be there to support you. And I'm going to be that person. I asked for your vote on June 26th, and it's been a pleasure to sit in front of you this evening.
And Aya, thank you.
Thank you. Once again, I want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you tonight. It's really been a privilege. Through the years, the topics of importance will change because of our ever-growing and ever-evolving communities. Now, as a teacher, I am ready to tackle the education crisis, both with the quality of education and with the funding. And as the owner of my own business, my studio, and as the director of my department at a nonprofit organization, I'm ready to take on the task of growing small businesses and bringing commerce to Oklahoma. Being raised by the most fabulous and giving parents someone could ever have, I have been taught to treat people who have needs with compassion. And as your senator, I'm gonna work with people from all walks of life. Not only am I comfortable with this, I look forward to serving our state in this capacity. As a naturalized citizen, I can grasp the greatness of our country, knowing that all are welcome here through the proper avenues. Now, my track record shows that I'm an extremely hard worker, and I am ready to throw my energy into keeping Oklahoma the great state that it has always been. I'm fortunate to have the full support of my family, which includes my parents, my husband, our children, and our many friends. I've approached my campaign with an openness to my constituents. I welcome you to call me. I welcome you to email me, schedule a visit with me. There are people here that I have met and visited with for several hours with your questions and comments and your concerns. My door is open. And President Reagan once said that peace is not the absence of conflict, it is the ability to handle conflict by peaceful means. I firmly believe that all of us have common goals in mind. I believe that our perspectives and our views come from different areas because we've walked different roads, but I know that we can join hands and unify to make Oklahoma the greatest state in the nation. Thank you, and I will see you at the polls.
Thank you, Aya and Chuck. We appreciate your time coming tonight. If you had a question that didn't get answered tonight, feel free to stick around and speak directly to them. They'll be right outside. We're going to move on to our next section, to our House District 31. We have several candidates here tonight, and we have Gary Mize is here. Shane Wood is actually stepping in for Rod Baker tonight. Rod just called our offices. He sends his apologies. He is working on a combine for a farmer and was unable to get away. He couldn't get it fixed in time, so he sent his friend Shane, who's going to answer for him. And Barry Niles, who is an independent candidate, is also going to speak with us tonight. And just a reminder, gentlemen, we have a timer. You get 2 minutes opening, 2 minutes to answer a question, and 2 minutes in closing, and I have a beeper, and I'm not afraid to use it. So, yes?
Just to be clear, you made independent candidate, he's a Republican?
Oh, my apologies. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Forgive me. Forgive me. Yeah, there's one right here. He set this one up right here. I'm sorry. Do you want to come right over here? My apologies. Right here. Yes. Okay, and I will get. Shoot. Here's another one. Here you go. You can.
Do I have the droopy microphone?
You have. Well, we can move it, and do keep the mics up close as you can. So, okay. There you go.
Coin toss.
Yeah. And we did.
Mike's not on.
Hello. There we go. Sorry. Barry, sorry, you were not here when we did the coin toss, so we're going to go ahead and start.
Do you feel slighted?
I do not feel slighted.
Slide it. Okay. Okay. There you go.
Be fair.
I'm sorry.
Gary. So, Gary, Barry.
Yeah.
I have a twin brother named Barry, so the little Gary Barry thing. Yeah. All my life.
I have that shirt, actually.
Yeah? This might be yours. You never know.
Do you use Dean's cleaners? Could be.
All right, I think we're set to begin. Although I don't know how to work the timer, I'll try to act like I know how. We'll get it started here in a second. Okay. Thank you all three for being here this evening as we go to the polls on June 26th. And for our audience, if one of our candidates does not receive more than 50%, the top two will meet in a runoff on August 28th. With that, we'll begin our first question, and we'll start with Gary first. And the question, would you please introduce yourself and what compelled you to seek office and your vision for the office?
Yes. So, first of all, let me say thank you for coming out. I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks to Chris and Tracy, the Chamber and Guthrie News page. My name's Gary Mize, and if you don't know me, I grew up in this town. I was actually born and raised in Guthrie. I was born in the old hospital, which is now being revamped into something new. My mother and my wife are here. I really appreciate them being here. You know, what compelled me, I've got 3 young kids. I'm 41 years old, and I've got some time to work. But most of all, what I would say is, you know, as a competitor, growing up, as an Oklahoma lover, you know, we moved away for a few years and we came back because this was home. And I would love to see us not at the bottom of the list. I think, honestly, it's embarrassing. So I would love to see for us to improve in the areas that we need to improve, namely for my kids. I love my kids. I've got an 8-month-old that was born, 3 days after we announced and kicked off this campaign. So on top of being a business owner, a husband, and father of 3, we've been raising a kid, a brand new one, all the while we've been out knocking doors and calling people, all of which I have done myself because I wanted to do that. So I love my kids. I want them to feel like they have every opportunity here in this state to be successful. I think right now we're lacking. And I want to look my kids in the eye and say that I did my part.
Thank you. Barry.
Yeah, I ended up getting in this race. I'd looked at it for some time, and as I saw this whole thing with the health department kind of unwind and how get closer, okay. And I looked at how this thing is coming in, the health department, the whole scandal involved in that, and how the legislature didn't really have a handle on how to make that, how to ask the right questions to figure out this thing, this hidden money. And I spent 36 years at Oklahoma City Police Department, 20 of that in investigations. 4 of that was in internal affairs or professional standards. So I got to look at this, and they're not even handling this right. And I started talking to some legislators, and sure enough, they don't know how to deal with this. This is not something. You got corporate attorneys that know how to write a contract, but they don't know how to question somebody. Yeah. And I decided I can make a difference. There's like 1,000 different boards and agencies. Most of them don't answer to the legislature, but we do have, the legislature does have investigative authority over them. We have the subpoena process to bring them in and ask them the hard questions. That's why I ended up coming into the race. I also have 30 years in the Army Reserve. I was an operations officer, problem solver, leadership. That's what I do. That's what I did. And, you know, it came a point in my life I said, I got to step up and do this. And that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane?
Well, I've known Rod for a while, and like I said earlier, he's working on a combine for a farmer that's trying to get wheat harvest in. Rod, and it's a perfect example of the kind of person that Rod is. He believes in hard work, and he wants to work for us. He wants to work for our community and our state to make it better. Rod looked around when he decided to run, and he looked around and said, nobody is doing the job. And in a case where there's no one there to do the job, somebody has to step up, and Rod took it upon himself to throw his hat in the ring and to do his best to work for the people of his community to make Oklahoma a better state so that we're not last in everything, except for incarcerations. So that's what drove Rod to decide to run for this seat. He's a hardworking man. He is a family man, served in the military. He obviously works in hydraulics, so he spent a lot of time with grease under his fingernails. He's also been in the business world. Rod knows a thing or two about managing money, both making mistakes with money and then learning how to do it right. And one of the things that he wants to do is find where the money is going, because we can't just tax the American people, and especially Oklahomans and our community. We just can't continue to raise taxes with no accountability for where the money's going. And so one of his main points of business is to investigate where are these tax dollars really going.
Thank you. Just a reminder, it'll beep at 12. The first beep will be, you have 12 seconds to finish up. All right, our first question will begin with Barry. We are all aware of the dire situation of the current state budget. Specifically, what revenue streams do you support for correcting the problem, and what is any specific programs you would cut?
Okay. First off, as it's been repeated over several times, we're not in that dire condition right now. The projections for the budget is going to be over $1 billion extra money. That doesn't mean we need to be in a feeding frenzy over this extra money. Okay. The first thing we have to do is look at all these other boards and agencies, there's commissions, and see where their money is going. See where, because not all of them are funded by the legislature. A lot of them have their own funding streams. We need to look at those very seriously, you know, and are they using their money appropriately? The other thing we have to do, I think, is we need to look at, particularly school funding. We need to look at some things like the state auditor, Gary Jones, recommended some changes to the competitive bidding aspects of the school districts that can save some money. Good idea. Saving money is as good as is a good thing. There's a bill, 1040XX, that's right now in the legislature, HB, House bill, that would allow state school districts to consolidate administration, not consolidate school districts, consolidate streamlining the administration, again, saving money for the state. Also, the other deal, along with the state, is education, is there's also another bill out there that didn't get heard that would allow the people of a school district to vote another 5 mills towards their school district. So that's an additional funding stream. That's a vote of the people. You know, I have no problem with people raising taxes on themselves if that's what they want to do. So that's kind of a general thing, general ideas. Again, I don't think we're in that dire straits, but we got to be careful with our money from here on.
Thank you. Shane?
Could you repeat the question?
Yeah. The question, we are all aware of the dire situation of the current state budget. Specifically, what revenue streams do you support for correcting the problems, and what is, if any, specific programs would you cut?
Rod would like to see many of the state agencies broken up and given over to the counties, where we get to decide how that money is spent, where that money goes, and where the taxes come from, or if there are taxes that support those agencies. As far as the specific agencies that he wants to turn over, I'm not sure which ones or if he means all of them. He very well may mean all of the state agencies. But that is one area that he wants to do, is break up many of these state agencies that have essentially run wild for a while without any outside, or without enough outside scrutinization, and break those up and give those back over to the local communities to make those decisions for themselves, to give the people their power back.
Thank you. Gary.
Well, I think as it's been said, before in the previous candidates and also the previous two here, we are going to see a surplus. So along with that, we're seeing economic growth as a country and as a state. So we're going to see additional revenues there. For 17 years, I've been in the investment and financial planning industry. Last 6 years, owning my own practice, working with budgets. Most of the time when there's an issue, it's a spending issue. And it's a tough conversation to have, but you got to look across the table to the folks that you're working with and tell them you're spending too much money, or your wants and needs in retirement are too great for what you have saved. And that's not always a fun conversation to have, but it's a conversation that you have to have, especially when you're stewarding someone else's money. For 17 years, I've done that without any findings in an audit. I get audited on an annual basis, and I have no complaints. For 17 years, I've managed millions of dollars for people with no complaints and no findings in an audit. What I would like to see specifically, I think there's probably numerous examples, but one example that I've been made privy to from a meeting that I was in earlier in the year, listened to Joe Albaugh, the interim director for Department of Corrections. Huge issue. Bleeding money. Also prime for a lawsuit based on their antiquated system of record keeping. And he can't get anybody to listen to him because it's not glamorous, it's not sexy. Well, last time I looked, as far as my wife and I are concerned, saving money where we can, it's pretty glamorous. We like to do that. So that's an example of one that I would like to beat that drum as soon as we're down there.
Thank you. Next question will begin with Shane. In the same manner a business of a family would have to do, is there any way the candidates can do a department by department and line by line current budget for the state?
Well, again, that goes back to Rod's desire to break up these state agencies. You have more control over something when it's a smaller thing, when it's a county by county basis versus the entire state. When there's less people involved, there's less money involved, things become easier to handle. Rod has experience with financial, he worked in the investment world. He knows about managing other people's money, stewarding other people's money that they've entrusted to him. And he believes that breaking up some of these agencies and taking them out of the state-run whole state picture and breaking them down into a smaller county by county will make it easier to hold our leaders accountable and to see where the money goes. Because how difficult would it be for me to go down to the state capitol and find out where this money has gone? They're not going to listen to me, and they'll hand me a stack of papers that's 7 feet tall. When it's Logan County, it's different than when it's the whole state of Oklahoma. The principles are still there. You still have to handle other people's money responsibly as though it were your own, and you have to be able to answer for those things. But when it's a smaller budget, when it's your county that you're invested in, it's harder for things to slip through the cracks.
Thank you. Gary.
Please repeat it.
Absolutely. I forgot it too. In the same manner a business or a family would have to do.
Line item budgeting.
Correct.
Yeah.
And departments.
Sorry. Snap back to it. In my opinion, and I mentioned this in the previous answer, 17 years working with money, stewarding other people's money, dealing with budgets. That's, in my personal opinion, that's kind of a baseline thing, line item budgeting. When you're stewarding someone else's money, it's not mine, it's yours. Well, in some way it's mine, right? I pay some taxes too.
We hope.
You can check. It's there. Yeah, I mean, that is in my wheelhouse. That is what I do. For 17 years, I get audited on an annual basis. Everything's above board. It's all out in the open. Our clients know what we're going to do for them. They know how we're going to get paid. They know where the money's coming from. We disclose all of that up front. When you're handling someone else's money, I think that's kind of a baseline issue. But I mean, I hate to sound simple, but that's the way I would like to see it done. Mm-hmm. I can't send an email or receive an email without 10 people knowing it. I think public sector should be the exact same. Plain and simple. And it should be line item. We should know where the money's going. But truth is, we should already have that plan of, hey, here are the services that we want to see. Here's the money that we have to perform, said services. So I'm going to tell you what I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you, and then I'm going to tell you what I told you. It's kind of the same thing with the money. Here's the money that we have. Here's what we're going to do with it, and then I'm going to show you we did that. And if we screwed up, we need some accountability. We need to create a culture where people are held accountable for misappropriation. Not just, oh, it was $30 million, poof, we got it. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Thank you. Barry.
Yeah. I mean, you kind of said some of the same things, but yeah, we need to go down. We need to look at what they call zero-based budgeting. In other words, there's a tendency to just go, oh, well, we had X amount this year, we'll add 10% to it, and that's what we're going to want next year. We got to take that all the way back down to the basic functions of the agency, of that government agency, and go, is this really what you need? Is this really what you want to do? Did this program work? Are we wasting our money with this? We need to ask those questions. And unfortunately, for about 60% of the state government, the only way the legislature has any visibility on it is through the investigative process. Because all these boards and commissions, they have their own funding streams, they deal with their own money. We don't see it. The legislature doesn't see it. The governor has no authority over it. They can take your money, they can waste your money any way they want, and there's not much we can do about it unless we call them in and ask them the questions. And that's really what I want to do with it, is make sure that they're spending the money correctly. As far as should we as a legislature go through line by line of what these agencies propose as a budget? Absolutely. And make them justify everything. That sounds a little harsh, but at the same time, you got to justify it. You got to prove it works. And that's what we need to do with our time, with our budget.
Thank you. Next question, we'll begin with Gary. Where do you stand on making Oklahoma agriculture better, since agriculture is one of the major revenue generators for our state as well as employees? What will you do to back it and strengthen it?
Yeah, my answer to that's pretty plain and simple. And some of the things, again, reiterations from earlier, but holding the line against new taxes and causing strain there, but ultimately talking about and fighting against any regulation that would cause issue. I saw that in my private sector business over the last couple of years. The Department of Labor came in and said, we're going to hold you to this standard and create this new fiduciary standard and fiduciary rule. And companies went for a year and a half trying to figure out what the heck that even meant, because they just told them to start working on it but didn't really give them the framework while they were in the background trying to figure out the framework. Cost people a lot of money, cost companies a lot of money, cost individuals in that industry a lot of strain and stress, thinking something I've been doing for 16, 17 years in a business that I built that I hope is going to provide some income for me on a regular basis because of the work that we've done is maybe going to change. But I don't really know that because there's no framework. But you need to change. Well, the truth is, I felt as if I was already held to that fiduciary standard anyway. I held myself to that because, again, I'm stewarding someone else's money. So I've just felt like it was reiteration. So we're paying money And companies, it costs them money to do the same thing that we're already doing. So I think fighting, regulation that is costly and prohibitive for business, I'm going to fight that tooth and nail. I think it's ridiculous, and government has the potential to do that sometimes. So those are a couple of ideas.
Thank you. Barry.
Yeah. It's kind of the same thing. One of the things we have to do is look at diversifying the economy. And one of those things we can diversify the economy with is finding end products or processing plants, processing things for our agricultural products. They don't really, we have some flour mills, we have some things like that, but we don't really have a canner. We don't really have any we got things like that to add value to the agricultural products we already have. I think we need to look at that in a serious fashion. But at the same time, we also need to make sure we keep our tax base low to where it needs to be. And we also need to make sure our regulation systems, the regulatory agencies are appropriate. Appropriate for safety, appropriate for health. And I really want to foster an attitude on state government is not how you can't do something, but how we can. Let's get the regulators together and put their heads together and say, how do we do this? How do we make it safe? How do we protect the environment? With the idea that we need to do this, but how do we do it correctly? How do we do it safely? How do we do it environmentally carefully? That's the kind of attitude we got to change. We can't have this gotcha attitude. Oh, well, you didn't do something right, so we're going to fine you. No, we got to turn that around. We got to make sure we protect the environment, protect workers in a cooperative method, not an adversarial method. And I really think that's where we go. I think that's how we progress as a state, all one team.
Thank you. Shane.
Well, obviously, Rod works closely with farmers. He knows what's important to them. He knows the struggles that they go through on a daily basis in their life, whether it's combines breaking down or, whatever regulations they have to operate under. And obviously, a large part of his personal income has come from farmers. So he has a soft spot for protecting those ways of life, because if those guys aren't out harvesting wheat, then we have no bread in the local grocery stores. So Rod believes in giving people their freedom and making sure those freedoms don't infringe on others by protecting the environment and protecting workers and things like that, at the same time not infringing on that farmer's right or anybody in any area of agriculture, their right to make a living doing what they're doing. Because many of our community farmers have been farmers from way back, and it's a lifestyle that has to be protected. And it's not just farmers, but production in agriculture of any kind. That's a way of life that's important to Rod, because he's worked with these families for a very long time, and he's seen the struggles that they go through, and he wants to do everything he can to support those people and allow them to continue that way of life, provided it doesn't infringe or endanger anyone else. And he's going to work as hard as he can to ensure that that happens.
Thank you. We'll now move to some of to the topic of education here in this Q&A. First question is, and we'll begin with Barry first. Tell us about your own personal experience with public education.
Well, I mean, I grew up in Oklahoma City and Bethany, went to high school, went to elementary school and junior high in Oklahoma City, went to high school in Bethany, went to UCO, well, it was Central State Fairleigh University then. The logo still said Central State College on them. But, so I went there, attended graduate school there. So that's a lot of extensive experience with public school at that level. As far as educating our children, we ran the gamut from public schools, home schools, private schools, church schools. So it's a mixed bag. I think you got to find the right mixture, the right set to make your child successful in that line. But yeah, I'm a product of a public school system. Some people kind of go, that was the golden age of the public school system, but I'm not so sure, but we'll see. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane.
Rod grew up, went to school in Yukon. Then he went to college at Oklahoma City University. Since then, he has taught at Votex and Job Corps. He goes once a week and has lunch with his granddaughter and visits with the school principal and the teachers and the lunch ladies and everybody at the school. Education is very important to Rod because the education of our children is the future of our world. And Rod sympathizes with teachers in the spot that they're in, and fixing our budget so that teachers get what they need, schools get what they need is very important to Rod because he's been a teacher and he is in the schools and visits with the teachers. And so it's something that really gets him fired up when he thinks about kids that go without in a classroom or teachers that are forking out their own money out of their paychecks to buy supplies to teach kids. So education is a passion for Rod to fix the system.
Thank you. Gary.
My experience with education thus far has been I am a product of public education. I graduated from Guthrie Public Schools in 1995. I went to Southern Nazarene University in Bethany, graduated from there in 99, and my wife takes me to school on a regular basis and putting me in my place, so I learn something new all the time. My kids are public school kids, and they will be. I see no reason to change, and I haven't taught. I feel like there's so many teachers up here so far in the panel, but I did not teach in a formal setting, but I feel like I invest in my kids all the time, every day. So I'm trying to make sure that they are learning the information that they receive when they go to school. That's one of the first questions that I ask them when I see them. Tell them I love them, hug their neck, and I say, tell me what you learned today. Because I'm accountable, too, for their education. It's not just what the teachers are doing, but I can help complement that. I want to do that. I think that's a big piece of what is missing. It's not free babysitting. We have accountability at the home, too. So I want to complement what is going on. I feel like that was a multi-piece question. Maybe I missed some, but that's
Just
my experience.
Public education.
And I was a Guthrie Blue Jay baseball player.
There you go.
Which is a really big deal. And member of a couple of state championship cross-country teams here, too. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, next question. We'll begin with Shane on this one. How would you handle the current teacher pay crisis? Was the teacher walkout a success? And please share your thoughts on the group Oklahoma Taxpayers Unite, who argue against the bill that would increase teacher salaries by an average of $6,100 with a tax increase that was passed earlier this year.
Well, I know that Rod would say that the teacher walkout had successful points. He probably would not call it a success. Some of the things that he wants to do to address that, he wants to suspend higher education funding by 35% for the next 5 years and giving that money to the K through 12 Oklahoma school districts to give the teachers quality pay raises. He wants to reward all the Oklahoma school districts that invest in energy savings by allowing those districts to utilize that savings for classroom supplies so the teachers don't have to dip into their own paychecks. He wants to offer, he wants to pay off teachers' student loans and all the higher education loans obtained from state universities to remove that burden from teachers that are entering into the field after graduation. And one of the last things that he wants to, or the last thing he has on the list anyway, he wants to fire Mike Napoleon Simpson and hire Robbie Rainwater for superintendent. And as far as the funding and the taxes, I know he doesn't support taxes without great scrutiny as to where the money is going.
Thank you. Gary.
I get to follow that.
Yes.
Cool. How would I handle the pay crisis? So, what I would have liked to have seen is more leadership. I felt as if it was lacking. There was not anyone stepping to the forefront, as I saw it, that was really taking that situation by the reins and saying, hey, let's navigate this space. We understand that you all as teachers are frustrated. We certainly were not proactive in addressing their needs beforehand, and they felt as if that was their only option. Maybe it's some coaxing of the union, doesn't matter. They still went down there and they were there for 2 weeks. So that's an issue. I would have loved to have seen more leadership, either from the governor, from House leadership, Senate leadership, somebody saying, let's get down to it. Truth is, as I understand, they had what they had before they went down there, what they left with. I was down there 2 days talking with teachers, some from Guthrie, some from Deer Creek. It's a mixed bag. I mean, some felt as if, they were making some headway. Some felt as if they didn't get exactly what they wanted. But I would say that they felt as if they were heard more so than they have been. I believe, again, and I've spoke to this, but I believe it's a culture issue. These are business principles. You create a culture that you want your workforce to move to, and you want your government and legislators to adhere to. So I would love to have seen some more leadership there, and giving some direction. Because the truth is, when it was ending, I mean, I don't know if I'm the only one that felt that way, but it ended very abruptly, and I think many teachers thought, "Oh, we're done." That speaks a lot to the overall consensus of it, I guess.
Thank you. Barry.
Okay, well, I think we've already kind of beaten this to death, but with the increase in funding, increase of money that we're going to have this next year to the tune of $1 billion, that we really don't have a teacher crisis anymore. It was there. I got it. 10 years without a raise, that's a challenge for everybody. But I don't think that's going to be a challenge for the near future anyway. I think one of the things that these tax increases that were part of the teacher, whether they're part of the teacher pay raise or whether they're not a part of the teacher pay raise, is something that the Oklahoma Supreme Court's going to have to answer. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Attorney General has came out on that it's not really part; they're separate issues. That the teacher pay raise could stand on its own, which, okay, maybe we'll have to see what the court says on that. If they say it doesn't, then we're probably looking at a special session of the legislature to fix that, because we were looking at a special session of the legislature to fix 788. And I think everybody knows that, or anybody that pays any attention. So anyway, bottom line is, I don't think the teacher pay raise is going to be affected. But that's up to the Supreme Court to figure out. If it is, then we'll have to step in and fix that. I want them to have their money. I want them to make sure that they're taken care of. Again, whether we have to have these taxes or not is problematic. If the taxes stay, that's also going to have a negative impact on the economy. So we don't really know how that's going to finish out. Sorry.
Where's your brain? Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so as far as the taxpayer union, the people have a right to vote on everything. I stand by that. I signed the petition for that reason.
Thank you. Next question, we've kind of gone over it a little bit, so if you want to go over it quick, you can, or if you want to elaborate, you got the full 2 minutes. And we'll begin with Gary. What is your plan to find funding to allocate public education, including per pupil funding and teacher salaries? What specific revenue streams or changes would you promote if elected?
So, obviously this is a question that you hear a lot at the door. Thousands of doors knocked. Not quite at thousands of phone calls made, but I'm getting really close. And we still have a week to go, so I might get there. Probably will. I would like to see teacher pay raise continue to increase. I would like to see funding at the classroom level continue to raise. But anytime you're talking about that, I think you have to couple that with reform So we got to do it differently than we're doing it now. We need accountability for where the money's going at the state level, at the local level, and we need to have higher standards. You know, some of this is a pride issue, and I'm not talking about pride from the standpoint of where, you know, pride comes before a fall, but being proud of of your craft and what you are producing as a community, right? Blue Jay pride. That's you know, the way I would state it. But you know, couple of quick examples, and this may not be a favorite of one individual in the room, but looking at superintendent pay, you know, and maybe coupling that with or capping it at the highest level for an elected official, right? I mean, I think there's some merit there. You know, I hear a lot about consolidation. I don't know how valid that is, but there's a lot of people that would like to see whether it has validity. And if enough people are talking about it, I think you have to do something about that. You certainly have to present it as, you know, a representative, but it's not going to be a quick fix if you go down that route. But the other, you know, another idea that's kind of out of the box is smaller independent or dependent schools consolidating services, such as accounting, legal services, maybe even transportation. That's something that we employ in our business. We share and do some co-op for marketing and compliance out of Atlanta, and we share that with some offices all across the country, and it helps us save some money. Just some ideas, yeah.
Thank you. Barry.
Yeah, and to kind of follow on the same track, I think, and I spoke to this before, there are some things we can do. I think there's more streamlining. Again, back to the auditor inspector's report, suggesting changes to competitive bidding practices that will save money. I think we should look at, again, back to ad valorem taxes, allowing the school districts to increase their ad valorem taxes. I think there's some other things along that line we can do. I think one of the other things that these small school districts, and apparently there's the optimum school district is someplace around the 5,000 student number. I've seen that. And allowing school districts to combine administration, like Gary said, some of those core services, you can get a lot better price on fuel if you've got, you know, a fleet of 1,000 buses than a fleet of 20. You know, it's just massive. It's economy of scale. I think the school district should be allowed to explore that more. I think the other thing we got to look at is the school districts, the way they're set out, this whole system was set up in 1907. Well, this is 2018. That's 100 years ago. School districts were meant to be more or less self-sustaining and an independent, totally independent political thing. That's not working well for us. So beyond just funding schools, throwing money at schools, we need to look at the system and see what kind of systemic changes that we need to make to our Constitution, that we need to make to laws, to maybe make this thing more streamlined, more efficient, and make some more sense.
Thank you. Shane.
Well, there's several things that Rod has that he wants to do on that note. He wants to reduce the total number of superintendents that we have in the state by consolidating administration. He wants to align the superintendents and the assistant superintendents' pay with the pay of the teachers and the benefits that the teachers receive. Rod wants to see school lands that are not being used able to be leased to generate funds. And he would like to see donations to schools become tax deductible to encourage corporations and individuals that need those tax deductions, to encourage them to donate to schools, to use that money to make up for where the state budgets don't cover it.
Thank you. Our last question on education, we'll begin with Barry. What is your stance on school vouchers and charter schools?
Yeah, charter schools are really a useful thing. I think they're doing really well. And kind of backing up a little bit, I think one of the ways that smaller school districts can save money is contracting with some of these online school systems, or like Epic, to have some of those hard skills, science and math courses that could be taught there and not have to employ a separate teacher, because those are hard skills to fill. It's better to have a highly qualified teacher teach science and math than it is to have just somebody filling in. So I really think that that's something we should look more at, is just creating this kind of charter school, brick and mortar school, trying to make a better liaison between the two, better connections between the two, because I think they're very complementary in the end. There's turf battles we're going to have to get over, but I think ultimately they're complementary. Okay.
School vouchers.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
I knew there was one more there. I kind of like to, really that's kind of morphed into this educational savings account thing, which I think is when you look at it, it becomes really a win-win for both the parents and the school district, because the school district gets to retain part of that money and the parents get to use part of the money. Again, I think there's a great deal of value of choice in education, a great deal of value in picking what's best for your child. And believe me, with 8 kids, we've kind of been all over in that, trying to pick what was best. And I think that needs to be up to the parents, and the parents need to have those options.
Thank you. Shane.
Rod believes that people should have freedom to decide, that a parent should have the freedom to decide the education of their child, whether that be a charter school or with a school voucher. He not real sure how all of that would play out in the real world, but he's open to the idea of that, because what parent doesn't want to be able to decide the education of their child, whether that's take it upon themselves to drive them to another school district or move to that school district, or however. He wants to see it be easier for parents to do that, for parents to be able to control more of their child's education. There's no system that's going to be perfect. A school voucher system is not going to be perfect. Charter schools aren't perfect, but what we have right now isn't perfect either. And what he wants to do ultimately is give the people in the community the power to make decisions for themselves and their families. So he's not opposed to either of those ideas. He actually kind of likes the idea. He drives his granddaughter every day to the school she grew up in, so that she can stay there. That's where her mother lives. And so he believes that you should have the freedom to pick where your child goes to school, and support that education however works best for the community.
Thank you. Gary.
I'd love to point off real quick on the last question. I just wanted to say, all of the things that I said, because I know you remember all of them, without losing local control. As far as vouchers are concerned, I've had conversations about that, and I've heard some good things, but I haven't seen a great proposal for it. I think anytime you're looking at that and taking money out of the current system, on a per pupil basis, I think it's going to cause some issue. But I'm not opposed to the idea. I just think it's young and not clearly defined. But again, I couple with some of these ideas. I believe that parents should have freedom to educate their kids and have some choice. Predominantly in the district with folks that I've been talking to, they just want to make sure that they have a choice to homeschool their kid if they don't like what their kids are being taught or how they're being taught in public school. And I share that sentiment. Now, my question is, might they have more confidence if we were doing a better job and funding education in the classroom properly? I have to say that I think there's probably some merit there to that. But I'm not opposed to the voucher idea, but I have not seen a good proposal that I think makes it work with our current system, with just pulling a kid out, giving them their quote unquote allotted dollars, I think it messes it up for the rest of the system.
Thank you. Moving on, we'll begin with Shane with this question. On June 26, voters will vote on State Question 788, better known as medical marijuana. Many believe the measure will pass and will help adults and children with their medical needs, but others believe the ballot measure is not only for medical marijuana, but recreational marijuana. What is your position on this important matter?
He says, I will call my local future seer so they can let me know. How in the world can I know how that's going to play out? I do know that Rod believes there's dangers in it. Above all, he believes in freedom for you and I, so long as it doesn't infringe on your neighbor's rights or your neighbor's well-being or safety. But as far as how it's all going to play out, who knows? We can look at other states and see what they're doing and what they're going through, but the bottom line is this is Oklahoma. It's not Colorado. We're different people. We have different standards. We have different, we're driven by different priorities, different beliefs. It's not a bad thing. It's just different. We're not like other people. So how it would play out in Oklahoma if it passes, it's hard to know. It's impossible to know. Anything that anybody says is a guess, but it's definitely something that is concerning. It could go bad really fast, but there are obviously, beyond a doubt, there are some benefits to medicinal marijuana. How you navigate that tightrope of medicinal and recreational and where are those lines right now, the whole concept is so blurry. Who can make sense of what right and wrong is? There seems to be lots of misinformation on the subject. There's a lot of good information, but there's a lot of erroneous information as well, and sorting through all of that is like climbing Mount Everest.
Thank you. Gary.
My thoughts on State Question 788. So I've heard a lot about this also at the doorstep. I've talked to veterans with disabilities, chronic pain. Had the pleasure of meeting a really nice man a couple of weeks ago, right before I knocked you guys' door, same edition. And he's an anesthesiologist. He's a cancer patient. And he's struggling. He asked me about it, and I gave him my 2 cents, and I said, you're way more qualified than I. You've been in the medical field for years and years. I want to know what your thoughts are. And he said, I think it has merit. I think it should be looked at. And I said, well, my concern is the way that the bill is written. It's very vague. It's very open. He said, absolutely. I agree with that. So I said, well, if we can shore that up, right, and get some specific reasons on which a medicinal marijuana card was issued, we certainly need to pare down the amounts. You can have 6 seedling plants, 6 mature plants, and a bucket full of gummy bears. I mean, it's ridiculous, right? I mean, my concern is it is a quick stepping stone to recreational marijuana, and that is problematic. Now, is it problematic in my home? No, because I'm going to talk to my kids. I'm going to tell them it's ridiculous. We don't do that. I'm going to tell them why. But we certainly need to give some framework if we're going to pass medicinal marijuana, which I think it might. A lot of folks are interested in it. And for me to get in between a doctor and his patient and tell him how to, treat them, it's like somebody brand new to the industry coming in and telling me how to plan for the next 30 years for somebody's retirement. I don't have any idea, But there's some pros and cons, but we got to clean the cons up on that, or it's going to be recreational marijuana, boom, right away.
Thank you. Barry.
Right, and the state question is very vague. There's lots of things that need to be tightened up in there. As it is now, with a note from your parents, a 16-year-old could walk into a doctor, presumably with a hangnail, and claim they need medical marijuana for it. There's absolutely no standards to it. That's what we've got to set. We got to create. We got to develop standards. We got to look at other states' best practices, what they've done, how they fix that. We don't need to totally reinvent the wheel ourselves. We could look what other states have done, bad or good. That's just one of the things. I mean, this thing has no. I really kind of wonder if the health department is the proper place to put all that regulation. Maybe it should be Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs, since they regulate the rest of the drugs. I mean, drugstores, pharmaceuticals, they already have regulatory functions in place for these kinds of things. Health department really doesn't. So I really think that it's maybe a better fit over there. And I'm not sure how we get it over there once you pass the state question, but that's what we need to look at. But yeah, we need to have, somebody needs to be inpatient, seen by a doctor, not over the phone. Some weeks ago, I had a reunion with my fifth grade class reunion. There's several of us that had kind of hung around together and ended up going to college together. And anyway, there's 6 of us that had dinner together one night. And one of my best friends then is a teacher, was in Colorado. And he said when they passed medical marijuana, he said almost immediately some of his best students in the class would come in high. And, that's a situation we can't tolerate. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next question we'll begin with Gary. What does criminal justice reform mean to you? We've been hearing a lot about gun control. It's one of many terms that gets thrown around as propaganda, but nobody talks about what it really means to them subjectively as an elected official. What would criminal justice reform look like under your watch?
Criminal justice, and what was the second part of it? Gun control.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry. Well, criminal justice reform, obviously we have the highest incarceration rate in the country, subsequently probably the world. And that's, again, one of those statistics that we shouldn't have. And it doesn't just start here, right? There's what's at the root of the problem. I think we've talked about some of those issues here this evening. I think there are certain things that we need to see decriminalization of. I would like to see, community service for some of those things, or giving someone a second chance under certain guidelines. But, that's what reform means to me, looking at the problem, seeing what got us there, and how are we doing it now, and then you make changes to said system that is getting you there. I mean, not to minuscule the problem, or minimize the problem, but that is some of it. As far as gun control, I don't think we have a gun control issue in this state and in this country. I believe it's a mental health issue. When I was growing up, there were guns in the back of a truck window in the parking lot with an unlocked truck. Nobody got shot when I was in school. We didn't have that issue. So, it's just not a gun control issue. I am pro Second Amendment. I have my conceal and carry. I would have signed Senate Bill 1212. I think for a law-abiding citizen, it's a non-issue.
Thank you. Barry.
Right. Okay.
I think we're going to disagree on this one, maybe.
What? Where? Not really. Oh. No.
I just felt it coming.
No. I'm like 12. I'm fully on board with that. I think we need to address some officer safety issues with that, but we need to create some conventions. But as far as criminal justice reform, here's a challenge. I spent 36 years in law enforcement. There are people that wake up every morning and go, "What am I going to go out and steal?" And they know that if they steal less than $2,000, it's pretty much catch and release. By accident, we actually stumbled into one of these rings, and which led us to others just as I was retiring. And going back 6 months, they were stealing over $50,000 worth of stuff. $50,000 of petty larceny every week, within 6 months. They were stealing every day. We could track it using some computer software. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of lost tax dollars. Yeah, and we had over 20 of these people that we ultimately identified once we figured out the clues. I left before it got completed, so I don't know where they're at with that. I knew they created a whole task force for looking into this. So point being, what I want to get back to is we need to allow for people who just make mistakes to get back on track. I think one of the big reforms I would like to see is an educational objective as opposed to a certain time. Get a 5 years or GED, whichever comes first. I think that would be beneficial because we've already talked about those advantages. And that's the end of my time, but that's a place to start.
Thank you. Shane.
Obviously, mental health is a big problem in the criminal justice system. We have people that have issues that end up committing crimes, but had they been able to get the help that they needed in the beginning, the crime may not have occurred. And so it's definitely something that Rod supports, is looking for ways to help mental health, to reform it and get people the help that they need. It's a really sticky subject because you have a person who has freedoms, so you can't force them into things. But definitely there's a problem with people falling through the cracks and winding up incarcerated for things that maybe they wouldn't have been otherwise. Rod is a Second Amendment supporter. He is a militiaman in his words, and they will take his guns when they pry him out of his cold, dead fingers. But with that being said, we also have to be able to protect our children in schools. He believes there's some very real ways that can be done while not infringing on people's rights to bear arms. Because like Gary said, 20 years ago, there was a deer rifle hanging in the back of every pickup at school during deer season, and sometimes not, just because. And so the guns aren't the problem. The mental health is the problem. The people that shouldn't have guns being able to get a hold of them, that's the problems that need to be addressed, not the fact that law-abiding citizens that know how to properly handle a gun and what it's used for, that's not the problem. So Rod supports the Second Amendment, but he also supports looking at the criminal justice system and the mental health specifically.
All right. Thank you. Getting deep into the night, so we're going to finish up with 2 audience questions, and we'll have our final thoughts, and we will exit stage left. And we will begin with Barry with this question. Who is the most important person in the country? Excuse me, county.
County.
It looks like an R, to be honest with you. I can read, but it says R, but we'll go with county.
Wow. The county sheriff is the top law enforcement officer in the county. Technically, legally, he is not in control of, but he is higher on the food chain than the police department of Guthrie. He's higher on the food chain than OHP. He tells OHP what they can and cannot do in his jail. That's being out of law enforcement. That's kind of my experience. That's what I know. So, yeah, why not?
If you want to add country in there too.
Country.
For the record, it does say country, but you can go with whatever you want to go with. Yeah.
Okay. Country. Yeah. Well, right now I think Donald Trump's doing a really great job, and I think he is why we don't have this budget problem right now. The pro-growth agenda that he's established in Washington is the fallout for what we're getting here in Oklahoma. So whether he's the greatest person in the world, I don't know, but his policies are doing a real good job for almost every Oklahoman. Matter of fact, one guy came up to on the porch one day and he says, "Well, is Donald Trump's president? He's done anything to harm you?" I'm like, "Well, no, I'm actually doing pretty well." And he goes, "Right. I've asked that to everybody, and nobody's ever said that he's done anything to harm him." So I guess that's where I'm at.
Shane, you can go 60 seconds on county, 60 seconds on country if you want to. You can answer however you want to.
Most important, or what? Could you repeat the question?
What is the most important person in the country county? Or who is?
Well, Rod's answer would be twofold. He would say the most important person in the county and the country is you, the voter. Because ultimately the people that are down at 23rd and Lincoln or on Capitol Hill are sent there to represent us, to represent the voters. I also know that Rod is a Christian and a Bible-believing man, and he would say the kids. We don't have a future if we don't have our children. If we don't have our children and they don't have education and they don't have a secure future, our future is not secure because they're what we're leaving behind. This is our legacy to them. Therefore, they have to have priority.
Thank you. Gary, please don't ask me to repeat the question.
I got it. I wrote it down.
Thank you.
You know, you could go a number of different ways with that. I liked your answer, Barry.
Thank you.
I thought it was good. You know, for me and the way we try and live our lives, the way I was taught, it starts in my home. My wife's the most important to me, and I hope vice versa. Because if we get that right, then we have a chance to get it right for our kiddos. And I said that because there's absolutely no way I wasn't going to and go home the consequences. You know, that you could go a number of different ways with that. Honestly, I think it takes everybody doing their job. Everybody. Private sector, public sector, churches. We all have a role to play. And everybody needs to be operating at an optimal level when you can. And the great thing about community is you have a bad day, somebody picks you up, So I think we all are the most important because when you have breakdown, somebody isn't performing their role, you see consequences. You see the effects of that.
Thank you. Final question of the evening will begin with Shane. How have you funded your campaign, and who else has put money toward getting you in office?
Rod's entire campaign has been funded out of his own pocket. He has received 0 contributions.
Sure about that?
Have you ever received campaign donations? No.
You want to call him and ask him?
We don't have time. I can't get him in a minute and a half. I can give you his cell phone number. You can call and talk to him about it.
All right. Thank you. Gary.
So in response to that, and the only reason I said it's not because of you, but I was called out earlier today in regards to this. But I have received campaign contributions from individuals, some family, some friends, and a gentleman on the doorstep after a conversation. He told me I had cancer, and we talked about it, and I told him, I said, I'm a praying man. I'm going to pray for you. So I went home and wrote his name down. I've been doing it ever since. And he gave me a contribution. I appreciate that. I'm humbled by that. I have taken PAC money. I have taken lobbyist money, and I've never said otherwise that I wouldn't. That does not buy my vote. For 17 years, I've been in an industry where people come to you and they want to do business with you. They might buy you lunch. They might buy you dinner. They might pay for a seminar. But I said this earlier, for 17 years, I have 0 findings in an audit and no complaints from my clients. It doesn't buy my vote. These people want to work with me because they believe in who I am. They believe in referrals that I've gotten. And that's all I've got to say about that. My integrity and commitment to this will not be questioned because of $1, period.
Thank you. Barry.
Right. Well, I've had put my own money behind it. I've also had friends and family put money behind me. I even got a rather substantial contribution from an old Army buddy that I hadn't seen in years. And it's just one morning I opened up my email and boom, I'm like, wow. I didn't even know the guy was still alive. So,
Good. That's good.
that's great.
Yeah.
So yeah, primarily, mostly, I've taken one check from from a PAC, and I sat down and talked to them. Said, "This is what I stand for. If you agree with me, I'll take your money. If you want me to change what I believe, I'm not taking your money. I will take money from the NRA. If they offered it. So, if they agree with me, I'll take it. If they don't, I don't want the money because you can't buy me. I'm retired. I don't have anything else. I'm not using this job, and I'm not accusing anybody of it, but I'm not using this job to pole vault me into anything else. When I'm done at the end of this, I'm in the run, whether I win, lose, or draw, I'm done. However long I stay in the legislature, hopefully, 12 years, that put me like 70, about the same age as Donald Trump. No. I'm not doing that. Anyway, this is hard enough. I'm not flying around the country. So, anyway, that's my answer.
All right. Thank you. All right. Final thoughts here. Again, best of luck to the rest of your campaigns until next Tuesday. And voters get out and vote on Tuesday, June 26th. With final thoughts, we'll begin with Gary.
So again, I thank you all for coming out. I'll do it again. Say thank you for sitting through this process. I have learned a ton. This is my first go around in doing this, and it has been fun for the most part. I have learned a great deal, and I've met some people that I wouldn't otherwise have met, and that's really neat. I'm humbled to be here. I'm humbled to have received the contributions towards my campaign, the support that I have towards my campaign. That means a great deal. With that comes great responsibility, and I'm totally fine with that. But again, I won't belabor this point, but I'm not in this for any other reason than to come up with some solutions, make the state a better place to be, attract business, and do my kids proud, do my family proud. Yesterday was Father's Day, and I went to a baseball tournament because God loves baseball, and I believe that we're going to have baseball in heaven. I'm convinced of it. My son plays baseball, and he had a tournament, and on Father's Day I got to go to a game, and then my wife said, "Hey, I'll come trade out with you, and you can go home, do the things you need to do." And she's made great sacrifice to help with this. I had to leave. My son had another game. They lost the game, ended their season, and they took a picture on the field with the dads, and broke my son's heart that I was not there. And I've since talked to him and said, "You understand what I'm doing? We've talked about this. I'm doing this to help you." So when your integrity is questioned and your commitment is questioned, and I have stuff like that, that's extremely frustrating, and it's extremely disappointing. And the campaign that we've run since September has been a positive campaign. It'll continue to be so, regardless of what anybody says, because at the end of the day, I have to look my son in the eye because he knows I'm running for state government, and be proud of what we did.
Thank you. Barry.
Right. I'd like to thank the chamber and all those people that made this happen. It's been a great forum. I'm not always comfortable at this. You be the judge if I'm any good at it. I'd like to, my wife and my son, daughter-in-law are here and here to root me on. I got in this race for three things, I got in this race because I felt we needed to step up. We need to change the way that they're doing business at 23rd and Lincoln. I want to see greater accountability. I want to see greater oversight, and I want to see more transparency in government. That's the three of the things that I want to work for. There's no they're talking about the checkbook online. No reason that shouldn't happen. The school districts have done a pretty good job so far. They're still working on that. We'll see how that goes. But I want to see every state agency put their checkbook online, not just where their money comes from, but where it goes and who it goes to. because the legislature is not big enough to have eyes and ears on all this complex thing that is the state of Oklahoma. So we got to have the citizens, we got to have reporters, we got to have those people help us out and point out where things are not right. We also have to make sure the state stays lean. We've gone through some lean years, right? Sometimes that makes you stronger. That makes you fit to fight. That makes you more cognizant of what you really, really need to accomplish your job, accomplish your mission, as we say in the military, rather than, oh, this is be nice to have. Let's get it down to what we need. The other thing I want to see is maintain a low tax base, tax rates. I want to see this non-adversarial relationship with regulation. I'm pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, and I'll never leave a fellow veteran behind. Thank you.
Thank you. Shane.
If you want to know about Rod Baker, or you want to know his stance on, if you want to know his stance on things, you can call him. You can talk to him. If you want to know about him, you can talk to his neighbors. Regina down at Brahms, Keith at the Napa store here in town, James at Cash Saver, Pepper's Ranch, Crossroads Clinic. Ask him. Find out what kind of person he is. He'll be at Missy's Bakery Wednesday morning from 6:30 to 9 unless there is some emergency. He wants to work for us. He wants to work for our district and our state to make things better for our kids and for our lives. Not everybody likes Rod, but you have no doubt about what you're getting when you have a conversation with Rod. He's the same with me when we're sitting on his back porch as he is standing on your front porch. And he's that same person when he's alone by himself. I've never met an individual that was more passionate about the things he gets involved in. He is a man of integrity, and I'm sure these men are as well. I know Rod personally, and I know the kind of character he has, and he's the kind of person that wants to work for you. He wants to hear what you have to say. He wants to know what's important to you. And if you want to call and talk to him, I'll give you his phone number. You can call and talk to him on his cell phone wherever he's at the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. I wanted to give you a couple things here. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Thursday night at the Oklahoma Territory Sports Museum across the street, we're going to have the Democratic Forum. We have one of the gubernatorial candidates will be there, and Kara Sawyer, the Democratic candidate for House District 31, will also be there. If you've missed any of our other open forums that we have had, they're all online. You can currently watch them as well on the Guthrie News page, Guthrie News Leader, and also on the city's page. And I wanted to thank you all for coming tonight. I want to commend you for being here because, as my good friend Jim Smith says, a good citizen is a well-informed citizen. So thank you for taking the time. It's important to do that. And also I want to welcome you all to Chamber Coffee this week on Wednesday at 9:30. It's at our new office on Harrison Street. A lot of these candidates come every week because our community matters, because our community votes.